welcome to the Messiantics Podcast, a podcast about all things Messianic Judaism. Each episode, we will be sharing our opinions as we tackle some of the biggest issues in Messianic Judaism. Now, here's your hosts, Rabbis Eric, David, Jonathan, and Toby.
Hey guys, so we're going to actually dive into an interesting conversation due to some of the stuff that's been floating around social media actually for a few weeks now. And what we're going to do today is talk about the show The Chosen.
Actually, what we're going to do is talk about the conversation about The Chosen.
Yeah, this may be one of the most informal shows you're going to get from us yet, because that we're literally just going to have a conversation about the stuff that's been said and floating around about
the show is going to slowly deteriorate to where we just
there's no show prep for this show.
Yeah, we just open up in the middle of a conversation.
And I don't know any. And another interesting thing is that out of the four of us, this is Rabbi Toby, by the way. Out of the four of us, Rabbi David and Rabbi Jonathan have seen The Chosen. And myself and Rabbi Eric have not seen The Chosen. Like, I have not had a chance to watch episode 1 of it. Like,
what a bum.
And I actually, this Rabbi Eric, I actually watched a few minutes of one of the very first episodes of the season because so many people from my congregation were like, hey, you got to see this, you got to watch this. And I started watching it, and it was moving along slowly, and then something came up, and I never did start watching it again. I always intended to watch dinner or something like that, but I intend to watch the whole thing in, what do they call it, binge watching, where you just watch the whole series. Yeah. I thought I'd just wait until the whole season was done, and then I would watch it, but I never have.
We're 3 seasons in, so I don't.
Yeah, I know.
It hasn't plan on starting.
That plan has not. We're
not 2 seasons
fully
in and a third
fruition.
on the way.
Yeah, well, that's true. Sorry.
We know where the story's going.
Yeah. So here, So as Rabbi Toby said, myself, this Rabbi David, and Rabbi Jonathan have actually seen the show, and we actually, not only have I seen it, but we did something with our youth group about, I guess it was 2 years ago. It was right after they released the first season of The Chosen on DVD. And we did a thing with our youth group where we, when we got together for youth, we would watch an episode of The Chosen, and then we would discuss the themes and the biblical accuracy and so on, and just like creatively, intentionally develop a conversation based off of it, and use the show as something to kind of probe the conversation out. And we had a lot of fun with it. And actually, at the time, the people that were helping run our youth group, the wife is a English teacher, or literature teacher, and so she was able to kind of really plug at the thematic side of things and what have you. So we had some really interesting conversations with it. And like I said, I've watched it. I really enjoy it. My kids are obsessed with it. They love watching it. I've got a almost 14-year-old and a kid that just turned 12. And so they're obsessed with it and love it, and also, so let's dive into it.
What breaks out this conversation is that in recent social media posts, YouTubes and YouTube videos and such, people are attacking the producer. I forget his name.
Dallas Jenkins.
Because they're accusing him of spreading Mormonism and other things. Previously, there were accusations against that and such. The reality is, like I said, I've never actually watched but the first few minutes of it, although I have been involved with relationally with people who have been involved in actually consulting. Rabbi Zaki Shapira was involved in consulting for The Chosen. Rabbi Jason Sobel.
And I think Rabbi Jason still is.
Jason Sobel is still involved in consulting. So there's that. But it's so interesting to me in discussing this that there's like 3 groups of people. There's the people that are just adamantly, like as Rabbi David said about his kids, obsessed with this program, that they're just so in love with this presentation of this emotionally connected realness of watching a biblical experience played out in a movie or a TV show. Even knowing that much of what's in it is made up, that they start with a biblical premise and then they fill in the blanks with poetic license and such. There's a group that think that it's horrible that they would do this because it's not fully biblically accurate.
Yeah, and I can say as someone who grew up on the Jesus movie, that is like verbatim the book of Luke, like one of the most lifeless things to watch. Like I get that it's gone all over the world and it's helped spread the message of who Jesus was.
What movie is this? Which one is it?
The Jesus movie. It's just called the Jesus movie.
There's been so many.
No, like it's
I've
just
legitimately never seen this one.
And
it was created years ago, I think the 70s.
As an outreach tool.
Yeah, and it's actually one of the first films about Jesus that was actually produced for the purpose of putting it into like multiple languages. So they put this into languages of like nations that we've never even heard of, and they would send it there with missionaries, and so they would basically it was an outreach tool. But it was,
and let's as we jump into this, understand that there are very few movies produced by people of faith in Messiah that are quality productions that are done. A lot of the TV shows, a lot of the movies that have been produced are low budget movies with people who aren't actors,
low effort,
and well, I won't say low effort. They made effort, but it's just when you compare something
or the actors that they do get that are actors are people that were actors.
C actors. They're not A actors. They're not B-list actors. They're C-list and D-list actors. But if you compare things that are done by the traditional Hollywood versus the things that are done by believers, even when you get to the movies like Left Behind or the series done with Kirk Fireproof and those. They're just breaking into a place where you can say this was legitimately a well-produced movie.
Sort of.
I mean, they haven't quite got there, but at least
they tried.
It's recognizable that somebody actually produced it, that there was directing going on, that there was acting going on in the movie. So when we come to The Chosen, and I have watched some clips of it, it is done in a professional high-budget production that puts it on par with other productions. And again, I enjoyed Fireproof. I enjoyed the movies that came out, Facing the Giants and those kind of movies with my kids watching them. They were not equal in quality or production to the ones that are done in Hollywood. So as we deal with The Chosen, this is one of the first real efforts to make Hollywood quality production for faith-based people. And but the third group that I wanted to talk about, we talked about the ones that love it, the ones that hate it because it's not biblically accurate, because they're making up things, because there are those that don't like it because they say it's a lie, because anything that you add to the word that's not there is untrue and shouldn't be there. But then there's this third group of people.
Real quick, for those people, just want to throw this out there, right? For those people that are in that kind of mindset, right? We all agree that Yeshua, though 100% God, was 100% man, right?
Right.
The Word of God never tells us that he stopped for a bathroom break. But it's a safe assumption that he did at some point in his life.
You would suggest
use the restroom. And so the and this is just, and I'll dive into this a little later in the episode, but this is the issue with the whole idea of people taking offense at the creative license is, we have black and white in the text. It tells us exactly what the text tells us. Everything else we're kind of making assumptions about based off of history and tradition and so on, which is kind of where The Chosen is coming from. And I say all of that because we can say with relative confidence that Yeshua at some point used the bathroom. The Bible doesn't say that. So for those that would be like, you can't add to or take away from, and if you say that something happened that's not in there, well, it never says he went to the bathroom, but it's a safe bet that he did.
It also, when we talk about this, let's be honest that all four of us preach. And I would say that none of us, when we preach, only actually read the text, and that's all we say.
Yeah.
We all share our thoughts of what a feeling or a relational issue or a connection or, the background from the culture built into the text in some way that does that. But the third group of people that I want to talk about are those that attack it from a different way. For instance, the group that says that from watching the trailer of the episode from the third season, that there's a statement in there that came from Mormonism, and thus this is all Mormonism. And I'm not saying there's no influence of Mormonism at all in what's going on, because if you talk to or watch Dallas Jenkins' response to this attack against the series, he says he's got friends who are Mormon that he discusses with, but he also says that that's not what influenced this episode.
Yeah, because he even said in his response to this particular one we're talking about, I believe, is that that he's never read the Book of Mormon. He's not read much of anything by the Mormons at all. So this is like the fact that it sounds like this actually is only based upon what he's gotten from the people who talked to him, Rabbi Jason Sobel, and there's a Catholic priest and a doctor of New Testament studies. I can't remember the university, but all that's from him. And
right. And again, this is not, and like I said, I'm saying these things as someone who hasn't watched it, and I'm not sure I will. I'm not against watching it. It's just not, I just haven't yet. I put it on the shelf of something that I plan to do at some point. But, so I'm not pro-chosen. I'm not on that team of, rah-rah, we all ought to. But the reality is this series was made to present the Bible in a creative way. It was not made as a evangelistic wing of the Assembly of God Church or the Baptist Convention or any of these things. So it's not written from a single perspective to promote one group over the other. It's not. Although they have people that are consulting from Messianic Judaism, it's not written from a Messianic Jewish perspective only. Yeah. It's not written from a Baptist or a Catholic or whatever perspective. It's just written to make the Bible stories interesting with the hope that people will then read the Bible.
Yeah. Sorry, Dave. I was just going to say, because if we're honest, there's a whole lot that, the Gospels don't tell us about, Yeshua and his disciples' journey. It says, they journeyed from Judah to the Galil. It's like, well, there's a pretty good, there's a lot of distance between the two. Like a lot of conversation I imagine a lot of teaching could happen. It doesn't tell us exactly. The Gospels are sort of like the highlight point. So I think creative license is fine. I have no problem with people. But see, when I walk into a movie or TV show, even a movie that claims to be based on, and I love historical movies, and it says that this is based on a true story, I'm automatically going to assume that it's not entirely accurate 100%. That's just reality. That's what artistic license means. If you paint the picture of a person, you do not capture the fullness of that person in the painting. So it's impossible to do that. Now,
there's a couple of things I actually want to kind of lead into the conversation a little bit with some of the background of the show from the research that I've put into it. So first and foremost is Dallas Jenkins is the brainchild behind The Chosen, and is the primary writer for the script and all of the show. Now, what's interesting is Dallas Jenkins and had I known this before I watched The Chosen, it would have tainted my opinion of it where I wouldn't have watched it. Finding out afterwards made it where it wasn't as bad of a situation. But Dallas Jenkins is the son of one of the authors from the Left Behind series, which I am not a fan of at all by any means. The books, the movies, the shows, whatever.
I wish the Left Behind series was left behind.
Yeah. So
you can find no matter where you're at, no matter where you live, at the closest Goodwill near you, you can find the entire volume.
Has anyone actually ever read?
Oh, they're everywhere.
Have you read it though? The
no
whole series. I have. I did years ago. My grandfather owned a set, and this should say something. My grandfather owned a set, and I was just at his house that summer, and I was reading from it, and it's great science fiction, immaculately written science fiction.
I read the first, I think, 2 books in the teen version series.
Yeah, I read the adult one, and the only thing I liked was not the adult, the grown-up version. The one's not directed at
Christian
teens.
Bookstores have a back room now. Get the adult version of the Left Behind series.
Okay, so let's get back. I read the regular book, Left Behind.
Right.
not the children's or teen version of it. And the only thing I liked about it, honestly, was if you read it, the Messianic Jews are the only group that all go to heaven. None of them are left behind. If you read the book, and I don't know if they intentionally made it that way, but all the Messianic Jews get raptured. Now, I don't believe in the rapture like that, but that's another episode of conversation.
Right.
But I thought it was interesting that the writers of these books, Tim LaHaye and the other guy, whoever it
Dallas
was.
Jenkins' dad. He's like, his name doesn't even matter anymore. It's now Tim LaHaye and Dallas Jenkins' dad. The other guy.
The other guy.
Whatever his name.
Your son has usurped you in creativity.
So they put that the Messianic Jews are the guys who all were righteous before the Lord. So I just want to set that out there for those that are listening that may not be Messianic, that it's even recognized as document and doctrine among the left behind people that the Messianic Jews are the righteous remnant of God.
So not only Dallas Jenkins, the son of one of the other guy, is whose
name does not matter.
Yeah, who's the brainchild of all of this and the writer of it. Now, one of the things that has fed into the conspiracy about that one line being being a quote from the Book of Mormon is that the production company that Dallas Jenkins uses, which is VidAngel or something along those lines.
Do we want to say the line? Have we said the line yet? What is actually said?
No, we haven't yet. We'll get to it in a second.
Okay.
But the line that they're saying is supposedly quoted from the Book of Mormon. The reason that this conspiracy has begun to develop is because VidAngel is a company based in Utah, and it's a company that
Sherry Jenkins.
Sure, why not? We'll go with that.
Just wanted to get that out there.
He was quickly Googling to find the other guy's name. But Jerry, the other guy, Jenkins. Jerry, Dallas Jenkins' dad, Jenkins. So, because of the fact that VidAngel is based in Utah and is Mormon money, it's a Christian production company, whatever, but there's Mormon money involved in it. I don't know whether Mormons actually own it or not, but there's Mormon money involved with it. And I mean, it's Utah. Everything's McDonald's.
They own the set that
Mormon
it's filmed
money.
on.
Yeah,
it's actually The Chosen is the first ever set that's not Mormon affiliated to be filmed on the Mormon set.
And
so
because there's Mormon money behind it, all of a sudden there's this one obscure line that everybody's like, oh, that's from the book. Now, what I want to know is who out of all of these people took the time to go read through the Book of Mormon to try and find this one obscure thing that could have possibly been perceived as what was quoted in this movie, because that guy needs to find a life. Yeah. I'm just going to throw that out there. Yeah. But I'll let Jonathan make the quote from the
line is the line is when Yeshua's having one of these conversations with the Pharisees, and he's I think at this point in the show he's claimed to be the I am, before Abraham was I am, and the Pharisee tells him, if you don't recant this, we're going to have to use the law of Moses, and Yeshua says, I am the law of Moses, which again supposedly this is from the Book of Mormon. I don't not believe that that's true, but at the same time, like when I first heard that, I was like, oh, like that's basically just a paraphrase of
what he says,
of what Yeshua says.
It's John chapter 1 in the beginning. Was the Word.
So it wasn't anything like, my mind didn't immediately jump to, oh my goodness, this is from some Mormon propaganda. Yeah. I can't believe this.
Right, but that's the whole point of this video attack, is not just that it was said, but that this is an insidious planned attack of the Mormons to infiltrate the believing body with Mormon doctrine, and we have to watch, because this one sentence will indoctrinate the entire believing body into. And so, again, I want to make it clear, because I haven't watched The Chosen, that I'm not promoting it. I'm just saying, as we have these discussions as believers, we need to be balanced and fair and honest about these things, that yes, this is very possibly statement that is made in the Book of Mormon. I haven't looked to see if it's in there, but it may be there. But it's also a paraphrase of what was said in John 1. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And then just a few verses down, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We beheld His glory. So it's not that it's an unbiblical statement that's been made, and the rest of the movie is paraphrasing everything between that's going on. So it's not so far-fetched that the writers paraphrase the statement and that's how it turned out, and it just coincides with something that was said somewhere else.
Even more blatantly in John chapter 5, verse 46, Yeshua says, "For if you were believing Moses, you would believe me because he wrote about me."
Yeah.
So,
and Rabbi Toby can, and I think this will be something that'll feed into kind of some of his expertise in movie and television passion. So those that aren't aware, Rabbi Toby and his wife Brooke have their own separate podcast called The Tape Store, which is all about 80s and 90s TV, movie, that kind of stuff.
We've been on hiatus during the move and the transition into ministry, but yeah. And so they a lot of what they do on their other podcast is dealing with the thematics of movies and TV shows. And so one of the things that stands out to me the most about The Chosen, and again, I understand that the two of you haven't watched it yet, but one of the things that stands out to me about The Chosen the most is actually, and the thing that I love the most about it is one of the things that Rabbi Eric was talking about earlier that people get up in arms about, which is the creative license, right? And I actually personally really love the idea that so what the Bible actually says, they stick to as closely as possible.
Yeah, and one of the things I love is in the beginnings they say this episode is pulled from or based on the book of John or the book of Luke.
And so where they try to stick as closely as possible what the Word of God actually says, when it actually says it, the stuff it doesn't say, they take creative license with while not taking away from what the text actually says. And with that, they've been able to create a character atmosphere. Because one of the things that it really is, it's a derivative of Catholicism, right? When we look at stained glass windows in Catholic churches, or we look at art from the Catholic era, from Catholic artists and all, you'll always see these artistic renditions of the disciples and the apostles, and they've all got like these halos around their heads, and they're all like these almost deistic kind of characters that are there, right? They've almost gotten like this because they're all considered
being human.
Yeah, they're all considered saints, and they've been
elevated,
venerated, and so because of that, they have this. So we all have, because of the Catholic influence, which, by the way, nobody really cares about the Catholic influence on the church, but all of a sudden, something that may or may not possibly be influenced from the Mormons is a blow up. But that's a whole other day's discussion too. But we have this mentality where there's like the disciples, the apostles, whatever you want to call them, they were better than, they were super, they were, they're the Iron Man or the Captain America of the Bible, and like we can't touch them and we can't. But then we read the text and we realize they were actually human.
Yeah, by the way, I just want to say that it's not necessarily true that nobody cares about the Catholic influence, because a few years ago they had the movie came out that Mel Gibson did, The Passion of the Christ, and everybody was up in arms about the... And I will tell you, I did watch that at the movie theater, and while I was at the theater watching it the very first time, I was taking notes, and I found 84 things that were absolutely unbiblical that took place in that movie. But... It did reach the hearts of many people which caused them to look into the Messiah.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the results of that were beyond they actually opened their Bible.
Yeah.
Which was, I think, a good thing, although I didn't appreciate the movie.
But one of the things that I appreciate about The Chosen is that they have kind of re-established in a lot of ways the humanity of and the approachability of the disciples.
And not only the disciples, but it actually makes Yeshua human
Yeah,
in
yeah.
their response.
So one of my favorite scenes, one of my absolute favorite scenes in the show so far is from the wedding in Cana, which was Yeshua's first miracle, the turning water to wine, right? And the
which
text,
is why it's your favorite scene.
Exactly. It gives me great hope. No, but the when you read that passage in the Gospels, it's a very sarcastic banter back and forth between Yeshua and Miriam. Like very sarcastic banter between Yeshua and Miriam throughout that encounter. And so in The Chosen, that's very much how they portray it. Is Miriam walks up, his mother walks up to him and goes, "Hey, they're out of wine," and Yeshua goes, "How's that my problem? What do you want me to do about it? Like, how's it? What are you coming to me for?" And she turns around to the staff, so like, it's okay, he's got it. This is Jesus. He's gonna take care of it. Like it'll be. And he's like
Jewish mom for the win.
Yeah. He's like looking at her like, yeah. And then I can imagine like if it really happened today, if that played out today in the same way that hey, they're out of wine. How's that my problem, Mom? What do you want me to do? It's okay. My son's got this. And then the head waiter's like, "Oh, everybody else saves the worst wine for the end when nobody knows the difference, and here you're giving the best." And she turns around and goes, "My boy did that. That's my boy took care of that, guys." That's
well, it's the
ultimate
same
Jewish mom.
when you think about it. That it's my son's a doctor, my son's a lawyer, my son's God.
Yeah.
That,
And so it adds an approachability and reestablishes the humanity of these characters, right? So one of my favorite takes on that is that Matthew in the show, granted, the scripture doesn't really tell us a lot about who Matthew is or his background or what have you, but in the creative license of the show, Dallas Jenkins and his team have, in a lot of ways, kind of attested almost a high-functioning autistic characteristic to Matthew.
Yeah.
And so now this character is even more approachable by people that are often completely unrepresented in our conversations about the Bible to begin with.
Yeah.
Right? We see Peter. Peter, throughout the Gospels, was a complete and total train wreck of a human being over and over and over again. And in the show, he takes great creative license to make sure that train wreck character is portrayed as the train wreck he is in the numerous places where he's a train wreck, and so on. And so we see this really powerful. Also, the way they handle Mary of Magdala, the way they handle her character in the story. The fact that one of the things that most of the time when we read through the gospel message, people glaze over is that there were hundreds of thousands of followers of Yeshua in his time of ministry here on earth. Like, we think, oh, he had his 12, he had his 70, and that was about it, and there was this small, but no, there was, a huge following. And in the show, they take great care to show the hordes of people following Yeshua around, as he's going around and ministering and teaching and the miracles. And I mean, it's just absolutely unreal the care that Dallas and his team have taken with this. And I think that the thematic approach and some of the ways that it all plays out, and how every season, each episode opens with an opening scene that builds the kind of theme of that episode, and they intentionally tie back into that over and over again throughout that episode, and each season does the same thing until you culminate at the end of the season with the finale of that season that ties it all back together again. And you see, it's just a really, really, as Rabbi Eric said, it's a really well done, high-end Hollywood-esque production, that they are intentional not only on trying to maintain the biblical accuracy of the narrative and to make the characters approachable and human, but also they're very intentional on making sure that it's a great production, that it's something that actually draws people in and presents the gospel narrative in a way that is receivable, that's encourageable, that draws people to it and gives them where they want more. At the end of each season, like within a week, people are just, when's the next one coming? When's the next one coming? When's the next one coming? And there's a hunger for it. And I think, as Rabbi Eric was saying, with the passion of Christ, that it created an environment where people were hungry for the Bible in some way or another, and what the end outcome of that was, we don't know. But as Rabbi Eric said, at least they were opening their Bible.
Right, it's much better. CBS, when I was young, did a mini-series on Noah that was on their regular, the regular viewing. It was a whole series, like Roots came out, and they did Noah. And in their series, they had James Coburn playing a merchant. So Noah's Ark, the flood is taking place. Noah's on the Ark with his family. And all of a sudden, you see this little paddle boat go out with James Coburn, who's got like this boat set up like an old Western merchant cart.
Like a snake oil salesman.
Who comes up to Noah's boat, and then the camera goes out to a wide view, and you see hundreds of other boats on the water. It was a horrible, horrible production about Noah. And then we see so many others, like the new Noah that they did just a few years ago, which was a horrible movie that was so unbiblical.
Yeah.
And the movie about Moses, where Moses was a little snotty brat that they did on. So at least this one's showing the characters as if they were real characters. So I want to say, as we begin towards wrapping this up in our discussion, I want Toby to share a little from his perspective as someone who does look at movies and stuff and has a podcast that he shares about that there are valid reasons for people to love The Chosen. There are also valid reasons for people not to like The Chosen. I mean, there are things that are added. There is creative license that's used. There are valid reasons for people to complain about it from this might not be biblically accurate, and this might be influenced by faiths other than mine, whether you are Catholic or Jewish or Protestant of whatever variety or whatever. So as we're talking about this, we're having a discussion together because this discussion is happening around us.
Yeah.
And we're not attacking any of the groups of people that are having these issues with this, but we should be able to have this discussion honestly. And the people who say this book might be influenced by someone that's not my particular faith have to be also open to the idea that the movie, the series, is having influence on people to read the Bible.
Yeah.
Those that are against it because it's creatively licensed and they made up the dialogue between the characters also have to admit that, it may be something that's not biblical at all, and it also may be something that is something that's of value, and the people that love it have to be open to the idea that there are other people that have opinions.
And also, if the creative license is your problem with the show, then I hope you go through your bookshelves at home and remove all books written by pastors and biblical teachers and such that aren't just them copy pasting
to include
Bible.
your Bibles, by the way.
That aren't just them copy pasting the Bible directly. If they have any expounding
commentary
on anything, it's no different than what you're complaining about on The Chosen. And the same, you probably don't want to go listen to your pastor or your rabbi preach on Saturday or Sunday, because odds are they're expounding beyond what the text says.
And probably my biggest problem with like this particular conversation that happens online is, I cannot tell you how many posts that come to critique The Chosen begin with, "I'm so glad I never decided to watch The Chosen because," and then it goes on to this thing they've heard, this criticism they've heard, this level they've heard. And so I actually made a post one day, and I shared part of it with following Proverbs 18:13, where it says, "If one gives an answer before he hears, it is his folly and shame. It is foolish to make a judgment about something you've never heard or something you haven't even taken the time to try to understand."
And based upon the critique of somebody you probably don't know.
Yeah. Exactly.
My approach is I don't have an issue with The Chosen. I can't tell you why I have not had an interest to watch it. I saw one scene. This past week, I watched a scene from the upcoming season where Yeshua heals a leper. I thought it was very beautifully done. Look, I'm not trying to be spooky, but I really felt like it was an anointed scene and expression of Yeshua. I really thought it was beautiful.
Right, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's important to note that when we talk about something being anointed or feeling God's Spirit in it, that doesn't necessarily mean that the thing is good or bad. It's you're receiving. It's God within you responding to how you're receiving something. There was a time where I forget the guy's name, but he wrote "Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head." He's a musician from when I was young. He became a believer, and he wrote a bunch of Christian music, which was the first Christian album I ever owned was by him. And man, I was just moved, and then I found out that most of the time he was writing those songs and singing those songs, he was still on cocaine and having problems. And there were other Christian artists that were at the same period of time were busted with cocaine or busted cheating on their wives or busted. And then I became challenged spiritually because I was like, how can God have anointed this music that this person did when he was cheating on his wife, or he was high on cocaine, or he was corrupt and ripping off people or doing all this? And it's not necessarily that the person that sang the song or wrote the song was the reason there was a feeling of this is spiritual, but it was the Spirit of God within us that responds to our reception of that. So I just want to make that, as you're saying, you felt it was anointed.
Yeah.
I've watched little clips of that and other things, and I was like, wow, this is so of God. But it's because our spirit within us responds to it. So I want to encourage those that do watch it or might watch it to allow God's Spirit to interact with you based upon what's done without necessarily judging if every aspect of it is perfectly accurate. I'm sorry, Toby.
It's good. No, I did see a scene from it, and I thought it was anointed, and the show itself doesn't bother me, and I'm not that. What I'm saying is I just don't want anybody to mistake me not watching it or even having an interest to watch it to confuse that with I disagree with it. I don't. I know that over the years, I was born in 1980, and over the years I've seen so many productions about Moses, about Noah, and oh my gosh, so many about Yeshua and about Jesus. And I have seen some of them, and I understand. Like, I'll just take one that I thought was a really, really beautiful telling, even though I know there was a lot of liberties taken. That was 1997's, or maybe it was 98's, Prince of Egypt, which...
Fabulous movie, by the way.
What?
It's a fabulous movie, by the way.
So, this was a movie that was produced by DreamWorks. It was not, it was not necessarily an evangelistic movie at all. It was, in fact, at the end of the movie, they put 3 scriptures up about Moses, one from the Tanakh, one from the New Testament, and one from the Quran.
Yeah.
But I will never forget how I felt and how I still feel when I watch the scene when God interacts with Moses the first time. And I believe that's because it's pretty much what happened. And again, it is dramatic, but I thought it was incredibly beautiful.
Yeah.
And again, I felt a lot of God coming off of it.
Yeah.
And there's moments when I think of, like, say, the 10 Commandments, which is Charlton Heston, they didn't even say his wife's name right. They called her Sephora. Her name's Zipporah. I don't understand what and why. I don't, But when he's on the mountain with God, it's like I start to feel a lot of God.
Yeah.
But I understand that some of these shows and films have to, they take the gray areas or the places where there isn't necessarily a lot of detail. Like, there's a period of Moses' life that we don't know. There's years and years we just don't know what's going on. So they take that and they stay true to the story. We can't limit God because I'm someone that, God has spoken to me through secular songs. He spoke to me through a Van Halen song one time. I was driving down the road listening to this Van Halen song called Can't Stop Loving You. And God just said, hey, that's how I feel about you. And I just wept in the car. It was, I do have some friends who are like, I don't think we should use those things to receive from God. I'm like, well, I can't. You may feel that way, and I respect that, but I'm telling you, man, God can reach through anything and everything. And another one is Chronicles of Narnia. I've read, I think I've wept through every Chronicles of Narnia book.
Yeah.
And I know that there isn't some lion running around named Aslan, but C.S. Lewis was an incredibly strong believer.
Yeah.
And he put a lot of God into those books. And I think that when you're reading it and you're seeking God, God's going to, he's going to reach through. And so how I feel about The Chosen, all that to say, to circle back to The Chosen is, and I just want to say about Passion of the Christ, by the way, when it goes into in the parts of the Passion of the Christ where it's like the actual narrative, which is his arrest into his crucifixion.
Yeah.
I don't feel anything. But when they showed, there's one scene when he's teaching on the Mount of Olives, when he's giving the, when he's doing the Beatitudes, there's this little flashback. I felt a lot of God on that. It was the Word of God, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that you should have an open heart and open mind. I'm not against The Chosen. I still don't have an interest in watching it.
Yeah.
And I think it's because when it comes to films and shows about God and the things of God, I think this is just my preference. I'd just rather go to the source.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel about that. So.
Yeah.
Right, and I want to say that there are, while this uses a lot of creative license, much of it is very accurate. The text parts are very accurate.
Yeah.
Where there have been other movies, for instance, back in 1999 or so, there was a movie that came out called The Rabbi. It was produced by Morris Cerullo, who's a evangelist of Jewish descent. And he made this movie called The Rabbi, which was presented, and they advertised it in Jewish papers and all that. And it presented a modern family having Passover Seder in which one of the people in the family was a Messianic Jew. And the dialogue between the two people, and it gets into this discussion, and then the movie goes back from the family to telling the story through a movie scene of Yeshua and his disciples. And so the whole movie was pretty well made and told the story of Passover and the death, burial, resurrection, things that we would see at our Messianic Passover Seders when we're sharing about Yeshua. But there's a scene in the movie where Yeshua is walking on the road to Emmaus. And as he's going to Emmaus, he reveals himself to his disciples. Now, on the road. Now, in the Bible, it actually says that Yeshua walks all the way to Emmaus. They sit down to dinner. Yeah. He breaks the bread, and as he breaks the bread, he reveals himself. The bread of life reveals himself as the bread of life in the house as they're having dinner. In Morris Cerullo's movie, he reveals himself on the road to Emmaus. Now, why he changed that was so ridiculous to me because it was such an impactful scene to have Yeshua, the bread of life, breaking the bread and revealing himself as the bread of life in that scene, but they didn't. They actually changed the text. You know, the don't add to or take away from the text is like a really big thing. The Chosen isn't adding to or taking away from the text. When they're dealing with text, they're actually sharing the text, but they're filling in gaps of relational and interpersonal dialogue and stuff. But they, from my understanding, is they're not actually changing the text itself.
Yeah,
they're having some dialogue like we said in John 1, in the beginning was the Word, which was with God, and the Word was God. Yeah. They updated the language, but the word, the meaning is the same. The scene is the same. What's happening is the same. Some of these other movies that people watch that have made, like The Rabbi, made by Morris Cerullo, actually fundamentally changed the text. They changed the actual story. They didn't just use creative license. They fundamentally shifted from Yeshua's disciples not knowing who he is on the road and him revealing it in Emmaus to him revealing himself on the road in there. So there are reasons to understand that when the text actually gets changed, let's complain about it.
Yeah, and even then, like I would say, is it changing the text? Because when God tells us not to change or take away from revelation that He gives or the Torah, I'm sometimes like, okay, is there a difference between changing the text for the sake of actually like for example, Marcion actually wanted to I want a very highly edited version of the Book of Luke, some of Paul's letters, or is it I'm telling a story and I can't remember every specific detail right now, but I happen to be discipling a young student and I'm paraphrasing scripture right now.
Well, there's a difference between that. If somebody is just talking and they misquote something or they misstate something because they're not looking at it, but if you're writing a movie based on a biblical passage that's available, I mean, there's nobody who doesn't have access to the Bible to actually fundamentally change when an event took place. Yeah. That would be like saying Yeshua was born in Nazareth instead of Bethlehem or something that significant. And so those are things that I'm much more concerned about the change that took place in the movie The Rabbi by Morris Cerullo than I am the statement, I am the law
of Moses
that was made in The Chosen.
Yeah, and I have to say, just before we end, I wanted to get
and I don't have an issue with that statement, by the way. I don't know if I've
Yeah.
Weighed in on that. I don't have an issue with that statement because it is the truth.
Yeah. And
he was the Word made flesh.
Yep. I wanted to get this out before we left up that I love how playful The Chosen is.
Yeah.
Like, I love the introduction to season 2, where it's basically kind of like a foreshadow of the apostles writing their gospels, and not necessarily that each of them wrote their own gospels, because we know for factual, that some of them did not write their own gospels, but it was their proteges who wrote their gospels. That talking about. John's talking to himself as he writes. Like and in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and starts writing, and then Matthew's like talking to someone about him writing his gospel, and the other guy's like, "What? I don't know if it has to be that accurate," and he's like, why should it not be accurate? And then he was very specific, very detail specific in his gospel. So I love that they play with that, and they give personality and life to these characters. Yeshua, you read about first century rabbis. These were the people you wanted at weddings.
Yeah,
they were the people you wanted at parties. They could do the party tricks and jokes, and they were the ones who you wanted to be around. Not only were they teachers of righteousness, but they were teachers of how to live life with great joy. And I've been watching this documentary that The Chosen did on Generation Z and their reaction to The Chosen, and that's what one of the young people had said. And I'm an older Generation Z, and depending on who you ask, and that was one of the things that one of the kids had said was there's a lot of joy. Like, out of all the representations I've seen of Jesus on film, this one has joy in it. Yeah. And that's the others that so many are sorely lacking.
So as we get ready to close out the podcast, I want to note one thing, that if you were listening to this podcast hoping that your position on this series would be upheld above the other two positions presented, we didn't do that. And that wasn't our purpose. We just wanted to have the conversation honestly about the different positions, what was going on. I hope that if you're watching this or listening to this rather on YouTube or one of the platforms that allow comments, that you'll share your thoughts on our discussion and participate in the discussion, whether it's on our Facebook posts or somewhere else you see the podcast presented. Let us hear what you have to say about your thoughts on the different positions. Are you for The Chosen? Are you against The Chosen because it's used as creative license? Or are you against The Chosen because you think that it is not accurate according to your faith position?
And with that, I want to, as we close out, I just want to encourage everyone listening. If you're going to be objected to something, like, actually put the time into and invest into watching or reading or whatever it is, so that you know what it is you're objected to, right? Like, for instance, I know a lot of people that are, a lot of believers that are very vehemently against Islam and the Quran and so on, but have never once looked at a copy of the Quran
to tell you what a Muslim believes.
Yeah. So and so I throw that out there because, like, there are a lot of people.
Now, that doesn't mean that we're not against the teachings of Islam, but we have studied to know what it is we're against.
Yeah. So what I'm getting at is if you don't feel like Rabbi Toby said, I just don't have an urge to watch it. I can't explain that, but I'm not against it, right? That's great. That's fine. But if you're coming against The Chosen and you're only doing it because you've never actually watched it, you've never actually seen it, you're making all of these statements of what you think it does or doesn't do based off of third-party information you're getting from other people online or whatever else, you're better off just not opening your mouth about it. Like, go watch it yourself, or don't. I don't care. I'm not telling you have to watch it or don't watch it, but don't come at something that you actually have no firsthand knowledge about. Because I know it's hard to believe, but everybody online thinks they have an opinion that's of value, and the reality is most of us online really just have a stinky rear end, like everyone else around us. And the fact of the matter is just because you read it online doesn't mean it's biblically true either. right? So if you don't like The Chosen and you've watched it and you don't like it, it doesn't resonate with you, that's fine. If it doesn't resonate with you and so you haven't watched it, that's fine. But if you haven't invested the time and energy into knowing what you're talking about as it relates to it, don't come at it, because there's no point, and you're doing more harm to your ministry. You're doing more harm to the message of Messiah through you when you're, as Rabbi Jonathan said earlier, quoting from Proverbs, when you're talking about something you don't know anything about, and it's creating bigger problems. Now, I'm all for conversations on these things. I think it's great. And in this case, we had a really heartfelt and honest conversation about it, recognizing half of us have watched it, half of us haven't. Nobody that hasn't was coming against it as much as just talking about the reality of what we do or don't know about it. And that's great and wonderful. But the fact of the matter is don't just attack something just because it's popular to attack it.
Right. And remember that sharing something that's not true is also not true.
We call this lying.
Yes.
Thanks so much for joining us. I hope you'll share this with your friends. I hope you'll subscribe if you haven't already done so in whichever format you're listening. And I hope you'll look for our podcast next week.
Thank you for listening to the Messiantics podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you can be notified every time we drop a new episode. And be sure to follow and interact with us on social media at Messiantics Podcast.